Hello and welcome to PT 668, Healthcare Delivery 2. This week we're going to talk about the legislative process as well as some advocacy efforts that you might make as a professional once you begin practice. You may be asking yourself, well, why do I need to learn about the legislative process? Didn't I learn that in my high school civics class? Well, I hope you did, but what we're going to talk about today will probably put what you learned in that class into a little bit more context. So we will review some of the steps of how a bill becomes a law, but we'll give some examples of how that actually works in practice. It's also important because when you do graduate and you do become a professional, you then become one of many voices for the profession, and you become an advocate for the profession, for yourself, for your patients. So it's important to understand ways in which you can do that. So hopefully this lecture, this discussion will give you a little bit more insight into that process. So let's first look at the objectives for today. So at the end of the session, hopefully you'll be able to describe the steps involved in federal legislation, identify at least one distinction between bills originating in the House or the Senate, describe the pathway of California state legislation, which is a little bit different from federal legislation, and identify some do's and don'ts when visiting with legislators at the Capitol. So let's get started. We will begin with a quote from the U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 1. All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. It's important to understand that all laws come about through Congress, at least at the federal level, and at the state level they come about through our state assembly and Senate. We often think of the president as wielding an extraordinary amount of legislative power. Although the president does wield an extraordinary amount of executive power, the president is not the one who creates legislation. They do play a role, as we'll see, in terms of signing bills when they become laws, but really our laws start and are crafted and molded and altered in the Congress through both the House and the Senate. So we'll take a look at that process. So laws begin as ideas. Now, an idea can come from any number of sources. It may come from a particular representative, a member of Congress, who has an idea for a law. It may and often does come from a lobbyist who is pushing an agenda, perhaps for a trade organization or some other organization. And our American Physical Therapy Association is an example of that. They will lobby Congress, hopefully, if not to create a new law, maybe to vote for or against a bill. But there are industry lobbyists who will come up with ideas for bills where those ideas for laws start. And sometimes they even come from individuals like you and me. So once this idea is formed, it is written as a bill, and a representative will choose to sponsor a bill. And sometimes multiple representatives will sponsor the bill. Now that bill then is assigned to a committee for study. And when it goes to the committee, the first thing that happens is it's reviewed by the committee chair. And that chair wields an exceptional amount of authority because that chair can determine whether or not that bill is even read or not. So the party in power gets to assign committee chairs, and those chairs can determine which bills even get read by the committee, not even making it past the committee, but they can just get squashed, or they can actually be read, and as we'll see, they can be debated, they can have some amendments made to them, and then they're voted on by the committee. So if a bill is deemed adequate by the committee, and the committee that it's assigned to is typically one that relates to the type of bill that it is. So for example, if there's a bill dealing with military spending, that would go to the Armed Services Committee. So let's say that that bill is reviewed by the committee, and the committee agrees that it is a worthy bill and needs to be pushed forward. It is then released by the committee. It's then placed on the House of Representatives calendar, where there it is debated by any member of the House. It may then be amended, and it typically is. Bills in their initial form rarely stay that way. And then ultimately it may come up for a vote. If the bill passes with a simple majority, then that will move on to the Senate. If it doesn't, it may go back to committee, it may go back to the sponsor of the bill, or the bill just may die. So before we talk about what happens in the Senate, let's actually look at some of the various committees, and this is a little bit of trivia here. So there are 6 committees listed. 5 of them are actually congressional committees, 1 of them is not. So without checking your smartphone or going online, see if you can guess which of the ones is not a committee. So we've got the Joint Committee on the Library, the Joint Committee on Printing, Select Committee on the Modernization of Congress, Select Committee on the Climate Crisis, Select Committee on Internet Commerce, and the Special Committee on Aging. So see if you can guess which one it is. No cheating. We'll find out the answer when we meet in class. All right. So what happens once that bill is voted on by the House? It passes the House with just a simple majority. It then goes to the Senate, where there's even more committees study, and there are often very similar committees in the Senate. And the Senate will do the same thing. Sometimes it won't be picked up, but sometimes it will be, and they'll review it, and they'll determine if that bill should go to the Senate floor. And when it goes to the Senate floor, it's placed on the calendar, again, for debate. Are there any amendments to that bill? There need to be any changes, things added, things taken away, and then ultimately it goes for a vote. Now, most bills that reach the Senate, in order to pass, just require a simple majority, at least 51 votes or even 50 votes, and the vice president would be the tiebreaker if there was a 50-50 split. However, any spending or appropriation bills or tax bills have to have a super majority, meaning 60 votes. Otherwise, they will not pass. So you can get 59 votes for that bill, but if you don't have that 60th vote, it won't pass. And actually, we run into this even before the bill comes up for a vote. You may have heard of the concept of a filibuster. A filibuster actually is a way to protect against the ruling party having too much power. So the party in the minority doesn't mean that they will vote for the bill, but there even has to be 60 votes to say that, yes, this bill will actually come up for a vote. So you have to have a vote for it to come up for a vote, if that makes sense. And if they don't even have those 60 votes, it doesn't pass the filibuster. However, there are some exceptions to this, and the main exception is something called reconciliation. And so typically if there's a taxing or a revenue or a spending bill, one time per fiscal year, reconciliation can be utilized. And reconciliation is a way to bypass the 60-vote supermajority. I'm not going to get into all the details of it, but it's typically used by the party in power, but they don't have the adequate 60 votes to get the legislation passed. But because of how polarized politics are, if we needed 60 votes, nothing would ever get done. So there's this one chance, and there are some specific rules about what can be used for reconciliation, but it's typically for revenue or appropriation, which are spending bills. They can use this one time for fiscal year, that they can pass a bill with a simple majority. So what then happens, let's say the bill does pass. What undoubtedly happens is the version that has passed the Senate is going to be usually slightly, but sometimes significantly different than the version that has passed the House, because committees have gotten to them and the whole House has gotten to them. The same thing at the Senate. The committee has reviewed that, and then the whole Senate has reviewed it and made some amendments to it. So now we've got two different versions of a bill which have passed each House. Well, which one then goes on to the president? Well, neither of them. So the House and Senate members come together for conference committees where they work out the differences. So that won't happen with the entire House or the entire Senate. They'll just be committee members who will get together. They'll see where the differences are. They work them out. And then they finally go back to each House for a final vote. And sometimes that holds things up. You get all the way through that first process. And then once the conference committees have worked out the differences, someone decides they don't like the new version and they're not going to vote for it. And that might make the difference between that passing or not. But that's typically how it works. And then if that bill does pass, then it goes to the government printing office. So then it's sent to the president, and the president has 10 days to review the bill. And the president has basically two options. They can sign the bill, and if the president signs the bill, it becomes a law. Or the president can veto the bill, and the president then returns the bill to the House, or the originating House. Usually the originating House is the House of Representatives, but sometimes it's from the Senate. But they return the bill to the originating House with objections. So then the Congress has some options. If they feel they have enough of a majority, they can override the president's veto with a 2/3 majority in each House. If they just know they're not going to have that majority, they may just let the bill die, or if it's close, they may have it come to a vote. And if they don't meet that 2/3 majority, then the bill dies. But if both houses override the president with a 2/3 majority, then the bill also becomes a law. And this is a way to check the power of the president. Now, in general, bills may begin in the House or the Senate. Most of them do start in the House, but some of them may occur or may start in the Senate. There is one exception. All revenue bills originate in the House, and by tradition, all appropriation bills. So revenue bills are bills that are designed to bring in revenue for the government. Oftentimes, these involve some sort of taxes. And appropriation bills are what we might call spending bills. And so they're going to determine, well, we have all this money. Who's getting this money? Is some of it going to Medicare? Is some of it going to the Defense Department? Is some of it going to federal highways, or what have you? It could be any number of areas where that money is spent. And so those bills start in the House. So the Senate may concur with or amend the bill, as we talked about that. So typically a bill doesn't look like it did at the start. So once a bill goes through all of these processes through the House and the Senate, it often takes on quite a different shape and different content. You'll see House bills are designated by HR, followed by the bill number, and then Senate bills are designated by S, followed by the bill number. And then you'll sometimes see companion bills, and they'll either be indicated with an HR or an S. So there are some other congressional actions. There are joint resolutions where Congress works together. They have very little difference than with bills. Typically, these don't necessarily require the signing by the president. It could be some things that are happening that are just more for operational procedures within the Congress themselves. So it doesn't require the president's signature. There are some examples, some other examples where there's a change to a constitutional amendment. This goes to the Administrator of General Services for submission to each of the individual states for ratification by 3/4 of the states within a set time. So there could be a constitutional amendment proposed, and as opposed to this being voted on in the House and Senate, although actually it is voted on in the House and Senate that there's this amendment, but then each individual state legislator actually votes, or legislature, sorry, votes on that constitutional amendment. And only when 3/4 of the states ratify that does it get added to the Constitution. We also see some concurrent resolutions. Again, these are matters that affect the operations of the House and Senate, usually some procedural things, and as well as simple resolutions, which are matters that concern either the House or the Senate, but not both. And again, those don't have to go through the president's desk. And here's just a resource for you on the legislative process if you would like to find out a little bit more. So, now that we've learned a little bit about what happens at the federal level, let's see what happens at the California level. There are many similarities. However, there are some key differences. Like at the federal level, laws start out as ideas. The ideas can come from a state legislator, they can come from a lobbying organization, or even from you. And we'll sometimes see examples of laws that have arisen out of someone's desire to have a change in the laws in the state. And here's an example that I think should resonate with all of you. And I should remember the Assembly Bill number. I don't. But in, I think it was 2009, if my memory serves me correct, there was an Assembly Bill that was brought forward that would allow California State Universities, or CSUs, to offer doctoral programs. Now, you may not be aware of this, but initially only universities in the UC system, or the University of California system, were designated to offer the doctoral degrees. The CSUs could only offer up to the master's, and this was written into state legislation as part of the mission of each of the university systems. However, as you are well aware, CAPTE, or Commission on Accreditation and Physical Therapy Education, required that by 2015, all PT programs in the country had to offer a clinical doctorate, or the DPT. Otherwise, they would not. They would lose their accreditation status. So this created a problem for many institutions because they had to change toward the DPT. But in California, it was particularly troublesome because Sac State and all of the other CSUs that offered the PTA program couldn't simply just say, oh, we're just going to switch to a doctorate. This had to get legislative approval. So an assembly bill was brought forward, and it did eventually get passed into law, which allowed the CSUs to offer doctoral programs. So hopefully that story resonates with you, because if it doesn't, and if it didn't pass, then you wouldn't all be here at the Sac State DPT program. So here was an idea of, hey, let's actually get the CSU systems to offer the doctoral degree, because if not, we're going to lose the program. And that actually went through an assembly member to author that bill. And so that's what happens. So you have to persuade a senator or an assembly member to author the bill. And actually each assembly member is limited to introducing 40 bills in a 2-year session. And so that actually would mean if everyone did that, there'd be 4,800 bills offered every 2 years. So hopefully that never happens. I don't think they're that eager to get that many bills passed. All right, so let's look at the California bill's life cycle. And as you'll see, there are many similarities to the federal bill, but there are some differences. So as I mentioned, there's the idea, and then it goes to a legislator and it's authored. The language, there's a council where the language of the bill is drafted. And then that legislator introduces the bill by sending it to the chief clerk or secretary, who gives the bill a number. So it's either a Senate bill or an Assembly bill. So when you see SB or AB, you'll know what that means. There's a first reading. The clerk reads the bill number, the author, and the descriptive title of the bill. Then it goes to the Office of State Printing, and it has to be made available for 30 days before any action can occur. That gives other legislators and the public an opportunity to look at the bill. Then the bill will go to the Assembly or the Senate Rules Committee, depending on whether it started in the State Assembly or it started in the State Senate. Then it's assigned to a policy committee according to the subject area, very similar to what we see at the federal level. So depending on the type of bill it is, it's going to go to a particular committee. And there would be a committee hearing that's held, and this is actually open to the public. The author presents that bill, and people can come in and testify for and against that bill. And just like at the federal level, the committee can choose to pass or amend and pass, meaning making some changes to that bill, or they defeat the bill. Revenue bills, so bills that are generating money, must be heard in the Senate or Assembly Appropriations Committee. Sorry, not revenue bills, spending bills, and then once that bill has passed the committee, there is a second reading on the floor, and this goes to the engrossing and enrolling office where it is printed out. And then there's finally a third reading where it is explained by the author. It's discussed and voted on by a roll call vote. And for it to pass, it needs at least 41 Assembly member votes and 21 Senate member votes. And so if it starts in the Assembly, it goes through the vote first, and then it gets passed on to the Senate. Conversely, if it starts into the Senate, they vote on it, and then it gets passed to the Assembly, and they also may make some amendments as well. And if it is amended during the process, it has to go back to that House of Origin for concurrence. So sometimes, let's say a bill starts in the Assembly, it passes, it gets sent to the Senate, they make some amendments to that bill, but they pass it. Well, now it's a little bit different than the original bill. So it goes back to that original House, and they can vote on, say, oh, do we like these amendments? Are we okay with them? They may be okay with them, which is a little different than at the federal level, where they have that joint committee that meets. If there's no concurrence, however, let's say the Senate had made some modifications to the bill, they passed it, sent it back to the House says, no, we don't like it, then there is a two-house conference committee to hopefully work out the differences, and then of course it would go through the process where the final version would again go to each house where it's voted on. So there's lots of various processes where it gets voted on, and it takes a while to work out all of the details. So let's say then it does finally pass both houses after its amendment, whether through concurrence or whether through the special committee that works out the differences, but everyone's happy with it. It's passed the House, it's passed the Senate, then it goes to the governor. And the governor has three choices. And the governor has 12 days to make those three choices. So the governor can just agree with the bill and sign it, and then it becomes a law. The governor can allow the bill to become a law without signature. And you may be thinking, well, why on earth would the governor choose to do that? So there may be some political reasoning behind that. It could be that maybe this is a bill that was passed the House and Senate, which maybe the governor is of a different party than where the majority in the House and Senate are. The governor doesn't necessarily like the bill, but recognizes even if the bill is vetoed, it's going to get overridden. So, but as opposed to putting his or her name on the bill, they recognize it's a losing battle. they're going to get it passed, but they don't want their name assigned to that bill. Or it could be just for some personal reason they don't want their name assigned to the bill for maybe some future political consideration. So that may be a reason why it doesn't get a signature. And then the third option, just as the president has that option, the governor can veto the bill. But here's a key distinction between what happens at the state and the federal level. If it is a spending bill, or what we call an appropriations bill, then the governor has the ability to line item veto. What does that mean? So with a spending bill, there may be 20 different areas, and I'm just throwing out a number there, there's usually more, where there's going to be spending. Well, the government can go through line by line and say, yeah, I like that spending, but I don't like that one. So they can veto particular sections or particular areas of spending on that bill. Now, this is unique. The president doesn't have that authority, and I know most presidents would probably love that. They don't have the option to line item. They have to either accept the bill in its totality or veto it in its totality. The governor of California has this option to line item, and that's just appropriations or spending bills. So let's say the bill is vetoed or certain line items have been vetoed. The legislature has 60 days to reconsider, and just like at the federal level, they can override the governor's veto with a 2/3 majority vote. So if it doesn't get that 2/3 majority vote, the bill dies, or it may never even come up to a vote. And oftentimes, if the vote just squeaked by in the initial time and they realize, hey, we're not going to get this 2/3 majority, the governor's vetoed it, they just know that the head of the Senate or the head of the Assembly just recognizes it's not going to pass. They may just let the bill die as well. So it can either die by just not coming up for a vote, or it doesn't meet the 2/3 majority. But if it does pass that 2/3 majority, then they've overridden the governor, and then the bill becomes a law. So really 3 ways the bill becomes a law. The governor signs it, the governor doesn't sign it, and after 12 days it becomes a law without the governor's signature, or the governor vetoes, and that veto is overridden by both houses. All right, so hopefully you've gotten a little bit better understanding, or maybe reaffirmed some of your existing knowledge about how a bill becomes a law. So as I said, all of the laws that even apply to PT practice had to go through this process. Now, we often hear in the news about kind of hot button or edgy topics, or real politically divisive issues, but for the most part there are many laws that get passed that aren't really all that exciting or don't create too much controversy, and really probably most of our PT laws fall under that category. You don't get people marching on the street screaming at each other over some of the laws that are governing the practice of physical therapy. Maybe that will happen one day, I don't know. But however, that doesn't mean that the laws that influence PT practice are not important for you. And so it's important that you know ways in which you can play a role in becoming an advocate for the profession, for yourself individually as a professional, and also for your patients. And so there's a number of ways you can do this. And I know I have it listed up here, but one of the easiest ways is even just with a letter writing. And you may have already gotten some emails from the APTA or the CPTA saying, hey, here's an issue, it's a bill that's going before Congress or it's going before the state assembly. We need your support. Here's a template for a letter. Can you sign it? Find out who your representative is. Send that off. And that's a way that you can become an advocate with fairly minimal effort. A little harder than just clicking like on Facebook or Instagram, but it also doesn't take too much effort because someone's already written the template for you. However, you may also choose to speak directly with your representative, so you can call their office. So you can either call the district office, so that's where they are wherever in the state, or the capital office. And as we are in Sacramento, you may be able to get an appointment, meet with them at the Capitol. So many of you will probably stay in the area once you graduate, so you have a much easier in with some of these state legislators. So if you do want an appointment, what you need to do is call the office and state clearly and concisely what the visit is about. So if it's about a certain bill, you want to reference that bill. You also want to state that you are a constituent. This is very important. So if you live in Sacramento area, you shouldn't be calling up a legislator who represents a district down in San Diego. You are not their constituent. So that's you really should only be speaking with your legislator. So once you get that appointment, of course, this is just good practice anyway and good protocol. You want to arrive early, and of course, if you're late, phone the staff and notify them. You may not actually meet with the legislator. Sometimes you do, but you may end up meeting with a staff person, but you still want to treat them with respect and treat them exactly as you would the legislator, because they're going to be the eyes and the ears of that legislator, and they're going to be the one who's going to be passing on your message. You want to focus on issues that are relevant to the legislator. So it's helpful to read their bio. Find out something about them. You can even engage in some small chit-chat. Maybe it has nothing to do with the bill that you're discussing, but just something you have in common. Oh, you both are a big fan of pug dogs and you raise them, or so, I don't know, something like that, and you want to share that. Or you're both massive Harry Potter fans, or so, I don't know, something along those lines. If you can find something out about them and you can break the ice. But you want to, talk in a way that's relevant, that's going to have meaning for the legislator, not just in their personal issues, but in terms of what sort of agenda they're trying to promote as a legislator. You need to be sensitive to partisan politics. There is a likelihood that your legislator does not represent your particular political views. So you can't go in there screaming and yelling at them because you disagree with them on a number of political issues, even though you might feel that you wish to do that. We see clips of that on the news of people confronting their representatives, sometimes verbally and even physically assaulting them. That doesn't work. Maybe it makes you feel good in the moment, but you might get into even legal trouble, and certainly isn't going to promote your cause. Keep in mind, they may have a different viewpoint than you, and this is a chance for you to educate them on why that, even though maybe you disagree on a number of other political issues, why this is an important topic, and maybe you can get them to change their mind on a particular issue. You also want to speak from your own perspective. So when you're discussing a bill, you want to share how that bill will impact you as an individual, how it might impact your patients, how it might impact your profession. So if you can make it personal, then the legislator is perhaps more likely to listen to you, and your arguments may be a little bit more compelling and may resonate with them better. It's also important to show how your platform, how your agenda, how your view of a particular bill will help them in their district. Legislators want to get reelected. If you can demonstrate to them, hey, this is an important bill and this is how it's going to affect the district and is very popular, that may be a very good argument and might help them vote in your favor. They're not always aware of every bill that comes up. So sometimes you're the first person who's brought this bill up with them, and they go, oh yeah, that really is a good idea. And they may have a number of questions for you, and of course you may not have the answers for everything. So if you don't know, don't bluff. Just say you'll get back to you on it, and make sure you do get back to them. It's useful to compliment them and thank them, if possible, for any past votes. So there may be something they voted on that you agreed with or you thought was very helpful. Maybe it isn't relevant to physical therapy, but it could be relevant to some other cause that you feel strongly about. People like to be thanked for the work that they've done. If they feel that their constituents have got their back, they maybe are more likely to vote in their favor. And this is why it's also important to do a little bit of research, not just find out the bio, but find out who is my legislator, what are their stands, what have they voted for, what have they voted against. And then at the conclusion, you want to thank them for meeting with you and their support, or at least their consideration. They may not offer the support, but at least thank them for their consideration. And the last point I think is really important. It's useful to follow up with a handwritten thank you note. And you might think, what? No one does that anymore. Well, do keep in mind that many legislators are old farts like me, and we grew up in an age where there wasn't email and there wasn't texting, or I don't know, you don't just do a Twitter thanks, shout out, hashtag, whatever. But actually a handwritten note shows, the personal touch and a real sincerity. So many people appreciate that. Maybe this will change over the generations, and I'm sure it will. But keep in mind, certainly many, not, and it isn't always an age-related thing, but certainly many of the older legislators did grow up in a time when people did give thank you notes, and that will make a mark, and people do appreciate that. So don't underestimate the value of that. Okay, a few don'ts to do or to not do. Don't talk about legislators or issues in public places. So if you are at the Capitol building, you don't want to certainly badmouth someone else. You shouldn't do that in general anyway, but you never know who might be listening, and it may get back to someone. Certainly don't be rude or argumentative. I've talked about this before. You may have very different political views from the legislator you're meeting with. Respect that. You may really despise that person from everything you've read or seen about them in the news. That's fine, but you need to bite your tongue. It isn't going to help your cause being rude or argumentative. These last two are very important. You do not discuss fundraising or contributions in the Capitol or state offices. That's a big no-no. It puts the legislator in a very compromising position ethically. And likewise, you don't discuss legislation at a fundraiser. It's understood that legislators do fundraise. I'm not going to get into issues of levels of corruption, but legislators are very aware of perception, and they need to make sure that they're at least adhering to protocol in terms of fundraising. So be very cognizant of that. All right, and then we've made it through. That wasn't too long discussion. Here are some resources for you if you want to review them, and the last resources from the APTA looking at advocacy. I imagine some of you will get very involved with advocacy. Some of you may be not, but there may be times as your career progresses where you feel the need to get involved, and the APTA is a great resource for that, as well as even your local chapter of the CPTA. So thanks for listening. If you have any questions, please let me know, and really importantly, share them with the class when we get together and meet. Have a great day.